we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. This is me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time listening, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you ever wanted to reach out to the podcast, feel free. Check out our DMs. Either hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at the Bigmark Pod or at the Bigmark Podcast. If you ever wanted to donate to the podcast, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/the Bigmark Pod. If you are listening, wherever you are listening, please give us a review. And if you could give us a 5-star review, it would be wonderful. Really helps us in the old podcast realm, so to speak. And if you are watching on YouTube, I know everyone kind of listens and watches to their own preference. But if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel, hit the notification so you know when our next video does drop. And yeah, it'll be a great little follow along. And like I said, it'll keep you always apprised of our next episode. But I kind of wanted to jump right into today's episode. Thank y'all for listening. I really appreciate it, every single one of you. And, you know, I like to kind of stick to some of these more rigid topics, but then sometimes I like to kind of, you know, branch out a little bit more. I did that friendship episode a couple episodes ago, and that was pretty out there. That was pretty nebulous, I guess, if you wanted to put it that way. But I have a big trip coming up. I'm going to visit my parents. Hi, Pops and Andrea. I'm going to visit them, and they live in Germany. They live in between Dusseldorf and Cologne in like, so the most western part of Germany. So going to visit them and flying into Amsterdam. And I wanted to talk about kind of travel in general, but obviously with this trip coming up right away, you know, I had a few thoughts about it. It's an interesting thing, you know. For this one, I'm on my way over. I'm flying to Amsterdam first, meeting my parents there, and then we're driving with some more family down to where they live. But I'm actually taking a connecting flight, and I was thinking about this, and I've told a few people already, obviously, and I was like, oh, I've never done like a connecting flight. That's not necessarily true. I did take a connecting flight when I flew to Bangkok. So that was in 2006 when I was playing for Team Hamilton in the International Children's Games. I actually did an episode on that. You can go check it out. But that was an awesome trip. And talk about travel. I mean, you know, I spent 18 hours on the plane that time, but that was from JFK to Bangkok. So, you know, the flight because we drove to Buffalo and then we flew from Buffalo to New York City. And that flight was like, 35 minutes? Like, it was like nothing. But the flight, obviously, from JFK to Bangkok International, I'm sorry, I forget what it's called right now, but it's something else, man. Like, truly. So that was back, obviously, in 2006. I was a kid, and I was just having fun. I wasn't really thinking about it, and it kind of like flew by, you know, for lack of a better term. On the way back, I was like kind of sick, so that was like another ordeal in itself. But like, I do not do well on planes. Now, I was probably significantly skinnier back then than I am now, but I just don't really fit on planes, and it's too bad. And It doesn't make for a very comfortable trip because most plane rides are, a few hours at least. Hopefully, obviously, if you're flying somewhere. But like I was saying, I never really took a connecting flight anywhere until I booked this trip. And so I'm flying from Toronto to Montreal and then have a layover there. So layover's going to be really interesting, right? Like, obviously you don't want to have like a really long, you don't really have a really long layover, but then you don't want to have a really short layover where you're like sprinting to your next gate. And especially since I'm like crossing over borders and stuff, but I guess they do most of the like custom stuff like in the like when you land, right? So I guess there's that whole doings, but I'm really looking forward to it. And again, on the way back, I'm flying out of Amsterdam again, but then hitting up flying into Detroit and then flying from Detroit to Toronto. So that'll be really interesting. And like I said, I'm super excited about it. But yeah, like I was in Portugal earlier this year, and it was such a great trip and I really, really enjoyed it. But the fucking plane ride really, really sucked. And I even chose like the more legroom section, and what happened is the more legroom section, because I guess the seat ahead is so far ahead, they basically make the seats like I don't know, train seats, like some like train cars have like the table that comes up out of the arm, and that was like my scenario. So I needed a little bit extra thigh room, if you know what I mean, underneath the arm, right? Because usually the arms can flip up, or at least there's like a little bit of something underneath. And like, yeah, maybe I'm going to be touching the person next to me, but I'm not going to be like squinched. I was legit like squinched in the whole time. Like my hips were Dunsky. And it was like, it was the craziest thing. And I had to like stand for a bit of the flight. So inevitably, when I'm thinking about travel, I'm obviously thinking about this, and this really sucks. Let alone the price, how prohibitive price can be, for certain flights. It's insane. And even there's those airlines out there that are quote unquote discount, and all of a sudden there's hidden fees. Every time you take a sip of water, they charge you. You're taking your bag. It costs you cents on the pound, like whatever it is, right? They're like nickel and diming you to death. And it's interesting, back in the day, and I hear stories, like I was listening to Joey Diaz on a podcast, and he was talking about that there was this airline out of New York City that would fly to Miami. And this is apparently like at the height of the drug days, like cocaine days in the 80s. You could fly from New York to Miami for like $20. And like, oh, I don't even know. Craziness. Like, that's amazing. And, so it brings me to the broader point of today's discussion. Travel is so important. And it is highly cost prohibitive. And that should not be the case. We should be able to be living in a world where we have world travel, where people can get out, because this is the issue, is that people get out there, people, maybe they don't get out there enough, but people are out there living their lives in a way that they don't really understand what other people are dealing with, other people with different life circumstances that live in different parts of the world. They have no idea that those people even exist, let alone that they're living in a completely different way. And I truly think that travel touches upon that, and it really allows you to do that. And, I was lucky being a young kid, being able to go to a few places, like North America is beautiful in that sense, that I know it's fucking 3 countries, but even those 3 countries have absolutely amazing, widely varying topographies. Like, it's the New World for a reason. Like, it's a completely different fucking area. And even just across Canada. And again, I've been lucky to be able to travel to a lot of places. I was visiting family in San Francisco area, going to Sacramento while visiting them down there. New York City, I was able to go as a kid a couple of times post 9/11, which was wild. I think I went in 2002 to New York City, which was, I was pretty young, obviously, but going down to ground zero and kind of being there a year after it happened. It was practically a year to the day. I think we were there like in October and November of 2002. Anyway, Florida with basketball, amazing. That was so much fun. And then going down with my family to like Orlando and Disney World and shit like that. Obviously, being very close, so I would never consider like Hamilton is not a border town, but it's relatively close to the border. I think we're just on the outskirts of it being like a convenient trip. People like St. Catharines Way, kind of closer. It's only like 45 minutes or so to the border. So you're having a great time. You're getting down there, no problem. It's closer than fucking Toronto. So you rip down there, Buffalo, Niagara Falls, New York, all those towns, and then into Pennsylvania, Erie, Pennsylvania, going over there. So like a lot of those kind of Cleveland, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, my favorite place in the world, going there, as much as it's like short, it's still like a travel experience, right? You're able to get out there and, with sports too, I fucking went to Thailand because of basketball, right? So I'm very, 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 very grateful that I've been able to say that I've been to a lot of these places. And it just expands, it expands my circle of empathy. I don't know if that's the word, or that's the term. But, going to these places and learning different things and understanding that, it's hard. It's maybe this is an inaccurate connection, but I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the ability to travel, for my grandparents, their ability to leave their countries during war times. That was like a form of travel, I guess. It's not necessarily travel for pleasure, but it's allowing you. And that's this whole idea, is that there's many levels to this whole idea that we as human beings are much more connected than we think. But because we've created borders and we've created these divides in our minds and on paper and on maps, we think we're all these different people. And yeah, some of us look a little bit different, but again, when you go to these places and you get to experience and you get to see their way of living and you get to understand, maybe they have a different set of troubles, but they also have different sets of cultures. That when cultures, there is that moment where cultures do connect. And yes, sometimes it's not always a smooth connection, but you can understand that, and it's a two-way street. It's always a two-way street with this kind of thing, right? And I think a lot of ignorance and a lot of hate comes from this fact that those borderlines don't get crossed, figuratively and actually, where you're not going to these places and you're not getting to know and you're not expanding your mind and you're not realizing that you're not the only person on the planet, and that just because there's certain people around you in your city, there's people that grew up in cities that have never left. And I understand why. Again, this is what I mean about this two-way street, right? I do understand why maybe some people have never left their city. Again, travel is cost prohibitive. Don't get me wrong, 100,000%. But it's also, if you don't need to go anywhere, if you don't feel the need, or if you don't happen to be a part of a team that gets sent to Thailand, like fuck, I'm pretty sure some of the guys on my fucking team, it would have been like their first time on a plane. Fuck, playing football. It was my buddy's first time on it, or it was his second time, but his first time on an airplane in university was because we were going to play a team in another city that we had to fly to. So not everyone gets those opportunities, and I totally understand. And it's funny, like in Hamilton years ago, I want to say, oh man, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago now. Let's say 20 years ago, Hamilton made this like big amalgamation of all like the little townships in its kind of surrounding area, and it kind of became this like, you know, I guess the greater Hamilton area, but it just became like the larger city of Hamilton. And practically every township in, you know, that was like directly touching Hamilton became Hamilton or became Burlington, and in the places that overlapped, whatever. For everyone listening who doesn't know what the fuck I'm talking about, I'm sorry. This is just municipal fun stuff in Hamilton, Ontario. But all these little townships in the surrounding area became part of Hamilton, except this one town called Dundas, which I've worked in and a lot of my friends grew up in. God bless Dundas. Shout out Dundas. Shout out Fundas. Great little town. But y'all know what you did, and you refused to become part of Hamilton, and you're salty about it. And it's because you live in a fucking valley that no one passes through, but all you have to do is just shoot up the mountain to Ancaster, go get your groceries there if you need to, and whatever, right? So there's this town right next to it that it can go to and get it. All I'm saying is, if you live in a place where all your needs are met, there's no reason to even travel to another fucking town. Like my buddy who grew up in Dundas, was his first time he ever went to a mall in downtown Hamilton in his whole life. In grade 11, I took him there because this is what I mean. It becomes an isolationist thing. Isolation, nationalism, blah, blah, blah. And it touches upon an interesting nerve, and it touches upon an interesting, I wouldn't go as far as calling it a hypocrisy, but an interesting dualism in my personality, where I am grateful of my heritage and where I came from. I like being Lithuanian. I like being Polish. I like identifying as such. I like that, like culture, and I like the food and all this stuff. But I am fucking Canadian at the end of the day. I was born here. My passport is Canadian. I'm fucking Canadian at the end of the day, right? So, but I also feel that connection exists, and I try to keep that connection with my roots because it helps me understand that, hey, there are other people living another way. Just because things are a certain way at this point in time, look back in history, look back at where your ancestors came from, how my grandparents, not even ancestors, just like direct ancestors, how they even got here, and understand that in some other places, people are in fucking deep shit. And there's a lot of things that happen in our world that's really fucking annoying and what we might perceive as oppressive, but it's fucking ain't real oppression. And that is truly looming over our heads still. We should understand that. And I understand that a lot of people's animosity against a lot of things that have happened and a lot of things that prevented travel, you know, and COVID restrictions and things like that. Like, I totally understand people's grievances with that, but at the same time, you know, and if it's in the sense that, yes, you're trying to nip it in the bud so it doesn't become that real oppression, I also understand that. But what I'm saying is, when you're saying like, I'm being oppressed, or, you know, this is violence inherent in the system, whatever that may be, just understand that where we are now, where we've gotten to as a point, is very good, and it's great, but it can be better. And that's the thing, is that across the world, people have it better in different ways. And I think that if you travel, if you get out there, if you get to experience all these different facets of life in these countries that maybe it's on a pie chart, you know, 99% of is all figured out, everything's good, but one part of it's all fucked up, or any ratio in between, maybe you can take some of that good stuff and you can help and you can try to amalgamate it, right? You know, there's parts of our human history where we did not fucking spread the word. We did not go around. We weren't able to. We had no idea that there were other people on this earth. We had no idea that there were other people on this earth that didn't look like us. So talk about isolation, you know, it was what it was. You stayed in your little town. You stayed where you were at. You couldn't really travel. And if you did travel, it was a huge fucking deal. And it was like on a horseback, and it was miles and like you couldn't just jaunt over to, you know, across the country, especially being here in Canada. You couldn't go from east to west in a day ever. But now that you're able to, it does open things up, let alone, you know, cyber travel, if you will. You know, with the world being so connected, we've never been able to, at the drop of a hat, connect with someone across the world and see what's going on over there, or understand, hey, what's the weather like in Paris today? Even that's so simple that you don't have to talk to anyone. You just check out an app. It's something that I think, because there's that accessibility gap, I think some people just throw it away. Because even the people who are able to travel, I think, yes, they do it and it's fun and you go, but again, you have to understand that it's special, and it needs to be celebrated in the sense that we are allowing people to get out there more, allowing people to experience other people. And because we have created this world where we are communicating and trading and working on this global scale, we need to strive to more and more to understand that different people exist. You know, obviously that seems like a not so novel concept, but I just mean, like, you know, again, I was a child, but when I was in Thailand, right, like just being in a whole new place where, you know, there's a major language barrier and things like that, like your exposure to that, it just really, maybe when then you're in the opposite position, you might give someone a chance. Because I think the problem is, and again, I said it before, as much as I love my nationalities and things like that, I know people in the Polish and Lithuanian community that they've been in Canada for fucking 40 years and they still can't speak English. And I understand it's a difficult language to learn, but when you get into these communities that are tight-knit and are already part of, you know, already have a similar background, I understand when you first get here and it helps you ease into it, but when you stick into it and you don't branch out, you know, that's a kind of a local microcosm idea of what travel is too, right? Because travel exists in many forms, but when you leave a country, so when you leave Poland and you come in here and you surround yourself with the Polish community and everyone you know is Polish and they only speak Polish, and the stores you go to, the people speak Polish there, and it's fucking great. I love it. I'm not saying we don't want it, but you are now, you've just transplanted Poland into Canada, and you live in this bubble, right? And like I said, you know, travel exists in many forms, and if you can't even get outside that bubble, you might as well have stayed in Poland, right? Like you're just now experiencing the world in a different, you're still experiencing home, but it's just transplanted in a different country. And yeah, it's probably not exactly the same, of course, but then, you know, dealing with people is so much that barrier, then, you know, language barrier, cultural barrier, whatever that is, it just becomes so much more apparent, right? And I think it's interesting because, you know, not that, because we can go forever on this topic, right? Because Bill Hicks said it, right? You know, outer space is infinite, but so also is inner space. And I think that travel into the mind and that travel into yourself is also so important. And I think it's something about, there's something inherent about travel that you're stepping outside your comfort zone. And I think a lot of that comes from probably our ancestors where, again, it was very difficult to travel and you didn't know what was out there and it was dangerous. It was much more dangerous to go outside your home. And not that it's not dangerous now, but I think that there's something still so deeply rooted in ourselves. And at one point, and if this is accurate, and it's been scientific fact for a long time, if we were nomadic people, the people who went out and explored were the true leaders, right? We needed those people to go out there. We needed those people to come over. But I always say, like, the people who came over and started North America for the first time, like, they were wild. Like, they weren't just like your like run of the mill, normal, easy going. But like, they were like renegades, people saying fuck the system, people saying fuck the king, people saying, we want out of here. I want to do my own fucking thing. I'm going to the whole new world. Like the same, I say it's the same people who wanted to go to Mars are like today. That same type of person is the same type of person who would back in those days would have wanted to come to North America for the first time on a fucking wooden ship. But becomes this philosophical idea, right? The grass is always greener, or even bigger than that, is it a kind of a Plato's allegory of the cave idea, right? Where your chain, your shackle is broken, and then you are freed, and you are plunged into this new world, right? And that's the allegory of the psychedelic experience too, right? Where you are now untethered from your normal experience and normal life and normal existence, and now you're thrust into this whole new world. And what you do with that and how you bring back that information is up to you. But it's important that you bring that information back, right? And I think that's why we have fucking Travel Channel. We have things like that. Like, God bless R.I.P. Anthony Bourdain, but he was always such a good example of that, where, he was able to articulate a lot of those feelings and experiences, I think, of being in a new place and being in a new environment, and bring that back to people who probably almost never get the experience or never get the opportunity to actually to actually experience that themselves, but they're able to watch him and they're able to feel that, right? So I think, again, there's something really special and there's something really important about allowing people to just bringing the story, like when you do get that chance, you bring the story back. So I think this is where a lot of like artists in the 60s and 70s built their entire career on this. And there's poets and artists, visual artists, painters, sculptors that live in this visionary realm, whether it's through psychedelics or not. And they live in this, like Alex Gray, and they live in this visionary realm, and their purpose in life, the way that they feel about, or the way I think that their purpose in life is to bring that information from that realm and bring it into ours. And I think that it's not futile, but it is truly, how can I put this? It is truly an unachievable goal. Oh, man, I can't say this without sounding like such a downer, but it's Sisyphean. Anyway, it's a Sisyphean task of you're just constantly trying to bring this information back, right? Like, artists are trying to put into words, the things that you can't say. And again, you're always trying to get to this place, and you never will. And that's beautiful. And I think that is amazing. It's kind of like those mandalas that those people make out of like monks or whatever they are. They make them out of like sand, and then they like sweep them away when they're done, right? There's something about the fleeting nature of it that maybe even if you do grasp perfection for a second, you can't hold on to it forever. But I think you only understand that is beautiful through travel, right? Like, yeah, that seems like such a fucking morbid thought, but if you understand that it's this constant ebb and flow, and that you know, a lot of the problems that fucking North America's going through, Europe went through hundreds of years ago, because they've been fucking ripping in modern history. You know, we talk about Graham Hancock and we talk about all these alternative histories. So who's to say? But at this point in time, anyway, in the present day, they've spent a few more hundred years at least trying to figure shit out than we have. And yeah, we got to look over there and be like, yeah, we came from that or whatever. But like, again, you don't just start a whole new fucking civilization and not have like some hiccups along the way. And realistically, we're not that old, again, compared to Europe. And again, compared to entire world civilization. We talk about these alternative histories, right? Like you know, you'd never believe it if you didn't actually go to some of these places. Like I've never even fucking laid eyes on some of these places that Randall Carlson talks about, you know, some of these geographical locations. I mean, I guess technically I've seen some of it because I live in the areas where it happens. But like to truly have a keen eye and pick that stuff out, that only happens through going out there and leaving your comfort zone and going out there and meeting people and expanding your experiences. And that's not necessarily going to be completely free of fucking meeting bigoted ass people the other way. You know, I remember going out with my band. We went out to Inverness. We went out east in Nova Scotia in Canada. And we fucking, I guess we parked a little close to someone's car, and she's like, hey, are you guys from Ontario or something? And I remember being so fucking offended. I was like, Jesus fuck. Like, A, how did she even know? Probably maybe because of our accents, because we were driving a rental. But like, I don't know, man. I just felt so weird. And it was like, geez, like that's not necessarily the East Coast hospitality that you necessarily expect. But again, that should never prevent you from going out there. Again, be safe, but get out there. If you gotta save, you know, don't necessarily spend money on things, spend money on experiences. And if you gotta drive there, you know, fucking roadies are fun as fuck. And I know gas is a goddamn dick grab lately, but trains, planes, automobiles, however you do it, you know, get out there and experience it. I'm looking forward to traveling during the Christmas holidays. That should be experience. Traveling through a few pretty wild airports is going to be fun. But I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait to see everybody. I guess we'll see everybody soon. When does it come out? Let me look at my calendar here. This is how we do it. Yeah, it'll be a day after Boxing Day in Canada as we have it in Boxing Day. So again, hope everyone had a good Christmas. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.